We want to take you now to the White House, where President Biden is issuing a new executive order aimed at protecting abortion access.
This is the first meeting of the Interagency Task Force on Reproductive Health Care Access. The president is doing this virtually while, of course, he continues to recover from COVID. Let's listen in.
They can fill prescriptions that they've always filled before. A tragic case of rape survivors, including a 10-year-old girl forced to travel to another state for care, wiping out the right to choose on whether you have incest, incest, or having a rape, or, this is just extreme. Even the life of the mother is in question in some cases, in some states. Republicans in Congress and their extreme MAGA ideology are determined to go even further, talking about nationwide bans that would outlaw abortion in every state under every circumstance, going after the broader right to privacy as well. But as I said before, this fight is not over. And we saw that last night in Kansas. In the opinion of the people, the opinion of the Dobbs case, the extreme majority of the Supreme Court wrote, women, and this is a quote from that case, "Women are not without electoral or political power," unquote. Court practically dared women in this country to go to the ballot box and restore the right to choose that the court had just ripped away after 50 years. As I said last month, I don't think the court has any notion, for that matter, or the Republican Party for that matter, to decide how far to press their extreme agenda and how women are going to respond. They don't have a clue about the power of American women. Last night in Congress and Kansas, they found out women and men did exercise their electoral and political power. With a record turnout, voters of Kansas defeated a ballot initiative to remove the right to choose an abortion from the Kansas Constitution. It was in the Kansas Constitution. They're trying to strike it and eliminate it from the Kansas Constitution. In a decisive vote, in a decisive victory, voters made it clear that politicians should not interfere with the fundamental rights of women. And the voters of Kansas sent a powerful signal that this fall, the American people will vote to preserve and protect the right and refuse to let them be ripped away by politicians. And my administration has their back. No, today I'm signing the second executive order I'm about to sign that responds to the healthcare crisis that has unfolded since the Supreme Court overturned Roe and that women are facing all across America. Healthcare crisis is, it's hard for me to even understand how they think this. Healthcare crisis is women can't choose, can't get an abortion even in the case of incest, even in the case of rape. But it goes beyond that. There are a lot of women who take prescriptions prescribed by their doctors and have been taking for some time for other conditions, for arthritis, for epilepsy, for Crohn's diseases. And in many cases, these prescriptions are not being filled. Say a 25-year-old woman, her doctor prescribes medication for epilepsy, has been doing it for a while. She goes to the pharmacy. The pharmacist won't fill the prescription because the same medicine could also cause a miscarriage. So she's not getting the medicine she needs for her epilepsy, whether she's pregnant or not. The pharmacy has no right to do that. Just yesterday in Idaho, the Justice Department filed a lawsuit to make sure that pregnant women facing serious threats to their health can get the medical care they need in Medicare-funded emergency rooms. Under federal law, no woman, whether pregnant or not, no matter where she lives, should be turned away or denied necessary treatment during a medical crisis. The Justice Department stepped in to make sure that this extreme state law criminalizing abortion does not put women's health and lives at risk in these situations. This executive order also helps women travel out of state for medical care. Secretary Becerra is going to work with states through the Medicaid to allow them to provide reproductive health care for women who live in states where abortions are being banned in that state. The executive order makes sure healthcare providers comply with federal laws so women don't face delays or denials of medically necessary care. And this executive order advances research and data collection to evaluate the impact of this reproductive health crisis that's having on maternal health and other health conditions and outcomes. This executive order builds on the first one I signed last month that created this task force in the first place. And that also will help safeguard access to health care, including the right to choose and contraception, promote safety and security of clinics, patients, and providers, protect patients' privacy and access to accurate information. Let me close with this. Beyond the actions you're taking, I know that along with Kamala, many of you have been traveling the country listening to women, healthcare providers, legal experts, state and local officials and legislators, and others, so that we are doing all we can in my administration to protect the rights of health and safety of the people of this country. You know, their perspectives are going to inform the work of this task force and the recommendations you make to me. I believe Roe got it right. It's been the law for close to 50 years. And I commit to the American people that we're doing everything in our power to safeguard access to health care, including the right to choose that women had under Roe v. Wade, which was ripped away by this extreme court. But ultimately, Congress must codify the protections of Roe as federal law. And if Congress fails to act, the people of this country need to elect senators and representatives who will restore Roe and will protect the right to privacy, freedom, and equality. I'll stop there and turn this over to the Vice President. There's so much more to say, but I'm anxious to hear from all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do I sign this order now? I'm going to sign this executive order right now, okay? Okay, folks, we got a lot of work to do, but Madam Vice President, I'm sure you can get it done, sitting there with all those folks. Thank you. I wish I were with you in person, quite frankly, but I'm getting there. You're on mute, I can't hear you.
We feel your presence, Mr. President.
Well, I wish I were there. Thank you.
Well, President Joe Biden has set the tone for our administration from the very beginning. From the time that an opinion was leaked to the time the Dobbs decision came down. And our president has been a leader in saying that the women of America should be protected, their right to make decisions about...
And we've been watching President Biden discuss a new executive order designed to protect abortion access. Today's executive order is aimed at states trying to block women from traveling out of state to receive reproductive care.
The president said the fight to protect reproductive rights is not over. He pointed to Kansas, where voters defeated a measure that would have removed the right to choose from the state constitution.
Here to discuss is CBS News political contributor Zeke Miller. He's a White House reporter for the Associated Press. Zeke, thanks for joining us. What protections does this executive order provide patients and medical personnel, and how are you going to enforce something like this?
You know, by itself, this order doesn't do much. It directs federal agencies, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Justice to take actions to try to make it, to provide protections for women seeking abortions in places where there are state restrictions. But by his own pen, the president can't do very much at all. What is new today, though, is the president directing the Department of Health and Human Services to explore ways of creating essentially a Medicare waiver system for states that do provide abortion services and allow that to take place, to provide abortions to women who cross state lines to their states, both to support the travel and also to provide coverage under Medicare for that. That program hasn't been written yet. The devil there will be in the details. So this is the president sort of trying to make a strike a symbolic victory, showing his administration is working on this issue. But as the president himself has said several times since the Supreme Court ruled a couple of months ago, by his own hand, he's very constrained in terms of what he can do.
And Zeke, how is the Biden administration prepared to respond to states that have abortion restrictions if they end up claiming that the federal government is overreaching with this executive order?
That's the White House has said multiple times that federal law trumps state law. And we saw that in the case of the lawsuit filed by the Department of Justice against Idaho's restrictive abortion law that the Department of Justice is reading because it had a sort of a convoluted carve out for cases of rape and incest or where the life of the mothers at stake could run afoul of federal law that governs how doctors in healthcare facilities are supposed to treat all patients in an emergency situation and or a woman in labor, and that would essentially would put that law afoul of federal law, and that's sort of the fundamental of our constitutional system where the federal government trumps state law. So they're saying that's not an overreach. The one wrinkle is that there is a existing federal law that bars use of federal funding directly for abortions. The Hyde Amendment, the White House has said they recognize that is the law of the land, and they are not trying to overturn that at this moment. So how that regulation, that waiver system is written at the Department of Health and Human Services within the constraints of the Hyde Amendment will really be something that states will be following and could potentially be the subject of future lawsuits.
Okay, Zeke. So today is the first meeting of this interagency task force on reproductive health care access. So what else can we expect from them down the road?
It's going to be a lot more of these sorts of what seem like incremental steps, looking for creative ways using the federal government, the influence of the federal government working in partnership with states that allow abortion rights to provide abortion services to women in states that don't allow it, or to potentially launch more lawsuits. This is a lot of show. There's not yet a lot of substance here because this is something that was done done by the courts and took effect nationwide. A lot of the action, like we saw in Kansas yesterday, is going to take place at the state houses and then potentially in Congress. There's only so much the executive branch can do. So this task force will put out a lot of paper. They'll make a lot of statements. They'll try to regulate where they can in the limited spaces where they can. But this is more of a messaging effort on the part of the White House and part of the Biden administration to show they are taking this issue seriously. But this is not where abortion rights for would be put back in place. It's not the solution that the advocates are looking for.
Zeke, let's widen out a little bit. The president having several legislative wins this week. You got the CHIPS Act, the Burn Pit legislation, Climate and Inflation Reduction Act. Do you think that these victories are going to help his overall approval ratings?
It's certainly possible. It will be really interesting to see over the next couple of weeks how those approval ratings move, because this is, we're going to watch potentially in the next week or two the president getting a huge portion of his domestic agenda that has been locked up in Washington gridlock for more than a year now through Congress, through the slimmest majorities in the Democratic-controlled Congress. That said, the president's been burned by this process. Legislating is often compared to sausage making. The president got really in the muck in this process of the last year or so, and that's going to be hard for him to lift himself above and elevate himself and cast. He'll be able to sign this legislation, declare victory, but can he actually politically get the benefits of legislation that is essentially long-term benefits to the United States, particularly on the chip side? There are no semiconductor manufacturing facilities that are going to be opening between now and the midterm elections. This is a longer-term issue for that the president's addressing here, and he's got a big hole to dig himself out of. This is going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly voters reward the president for getting that done.
Zeke Miller, thank you as always. We're going to take a short break, but now is a good time to remind you can always stay up to date by downloading our CBS News app.
Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News, always on.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation